Hi, friend. Thanks for joining us. We will start the webinar in about 1 minute. We're starting just 1 minute late. We'll start in maybe 30 seconds. I see people pouring in, and I just want to give people an opportunity to get in here because we did start about a minute later than we expected, but I won't be waiting long because we promised to keep this a short presentation and want to make sure that you guys get back to whatever it is that's demanding your time and attention today. So give us another 30 seconds or so while we let our attendees come into the room. I will do a quick introduction and then we will get started. Very excited to see you all. Thanks for joining. Okay, in the interest of time, let's go ahead and get started. I do see that there are people still pouring into the room. So excited to see how many of you were tuned in to the value of today's program. I know that you're going to get a lot out of it. And so we're really excited to see you. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Holly Lazaro. I am a co-founder and managing director here at GoToCollegeFairs. I'm joined by Jonathan Gowan, who is the director of the Tuition Break Program for the New England Board of Higher Education, and Ray Bergman Gallegos, who is the vice president of programs and services for the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education. This webinar is part of our new Counselors Coffee Break series, where we will be offering you small bites of really valuable information for you and for your students and families who are in the college search process. Today, we're going to talk about tuition savings and reciprocity programs, and our panelists are experts in this area, so you will definitely learn a lot. If there's anything you would like to rewatch, we will be posting this recording on our website within the next few days. So keep an eye on our resources page at GoToCollegeFairs.com if you need to watch again, or if you'd like to share it with a colleague. First, a note on how to engage well with this webinar. While we're in webinar mode, all participants are, of course, on mute. However, at the bottom of the window or screen you opened when you logged onto this webinar, you will see a toolbar. Depending on the type of device you're using, you might need to mouse over the bottom of the screen or window in order to see that toolbar. On the toolbar, you will see an icon labeled Q&A. Please click on that now to open a new window so we know you're all set to use that function as needed, and so you can see questions as they come up during the webinar. You may find that someone else asks a question you had in mind, so please watch that box during our time together to monitor questions. Because we have enabled the upvoting function in our Q&A box, please review the questions already in the box before you ask a new question. So questions are certainly welcome at any time in the program. We are going to answer questions at the end, but ask the questions as they come to your mind and throw them in that Q&A box. That's perfectly fine. And actually, we would love for you to do that because that gives people a chance to upvote the question that you asked. So if you have a question, open the Q&A box and make sure that it hasn't already been asked. If you see your question or one similar to it that's already been asked, please upvote that question rather than asking it again. This will allow us to focus our very short Q&A time at the end on the questions that the majority of you want to have answered. If you have any difficulty with this feature, you can certainly compose a list of questions and send those over to us at the end of the webinar via the contact information we share, but it is very useful for you to be able to ask those questions now while we are here to answer them. So again, chat is disabled for participants. Please use the Q&A function as I have described. So I will now give it over to the experts, Jonathan and Ray. So excited to host you guys today. Thank you for being here. And I will hand it over to you.
Thanks, Holly. Hello, I am Ray Bergman Gallegos. I'm the Vice President for Programs and Services And right now I am joining you from the Denver, Colorado metro area. Now, WICHE, so the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education, is located in Boulder, Colorado. And so we have been around for almost 70 years. So next year we turn 70. And some of the programs and services that we'll talk about today were original to when WICHE was founded. Jonathan.
Thanks so much, Ray. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. It's a pleasure to be with you here this afternoon to talk a little bit about these programs. I'm Jonathan Gowan, Director of Tuition Break for the New England Board of Higher Ed, or NEBI for short, located up here in the great city of Boston, Massachusetts. Very similar to our sister compact, WICHE, NEBI was founded about 67 years ago. And Tuition Break, one of the programs that we're going to talk about today was the cornerstone around which our organization was founded. And you'll find out our organizations have grown to do much more than that. But these programs are certainly really critical elements of the work that we do. So we're really excited to share that information with you today. So I'll kick us off here on this slide. Really what we want to do today is essentially just to give you a quick and dirty about how how programs like this work. We recognize your time is valuable, so we want to get right to the heart of the matter. We're going to talk about what they are, why they matter, and how these work. How do you get this information? How do you get these opportunities, I should say, to your students? So first things first, it's important to know that these are discounts on tuition, predominantly at out-of-state institutions. Now, most of the programs that we're going to talk about across the US are serving directly public institutions. There is an exception to that in the Midwest. However, predominantly the point here is to be a public service that has a public purpose and work and serve directly those institutions. I'll also note that there is a regionally serving element to these programs. You'll learn a bit about our organizations as we go, and you'll see that we're responsible for certain territories, so to speak. And so to that end, the programs that we run do have a regional serving focus. For example, here at NEBI, we serve the New England region. So New England residents attending New England institutions. And these things don't necessarily transfer out of region as the model is created. And so that is one important thing to know, is that these are predominantly regionally serving. And however, most states within the US, I believe if my numbers are correct, I think 46 states in the US actually are members of compacts and have these opportunities available. And so I'll also say that, part of the mission behind this is really to give access to highly specialized programs that don't exist everywhere at every institution. And so that's part of the idea, in addition to access, which my colleague Ray is going to talk about. But I'll also note that one of the things that we know in the world of enrollment is that most students are studying fairly close to home. Most students are not going across the country. And we know that this is a figure that has only grown since COVID. And so that's something that's absolutely critical as we think about what are the opportunities that are near, but may exist out of state at a public institution. And so how do we provide that opportunity to students from an affordability perspective? The last thing I want to share before I turn it over to Ray is that it's really important to know that these things are not scholarships. These things, I often will hear sort of parents ask, like, how does this scholarship work? And I'm always quick to correct them on that, because I think it's critical to understand that these are programs with an extremely low barrier to entry. And so they're not dependent on things like income, not dependent at all on test scores, not dependent on any of the factors that a lot of aid typically is. And so it's predominantly based on residency and the kind of institution that a student is attending. And so for that reason, I'm alwaalways quick to share with families, it's not a scholarship, it's purely a discount. This is really kind of a first line of defense when it comes to an affordable education. And so for that, and the great thing about that as well is that it doesn't preclude them from receiving any other kind of merit aid. And so it's the other reason I'm really quick to correct them, is that it's not a scholarship, it's a discount. And then there's a world of financial aid offerings that are still available even after this is taken into effect. Ray, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Jonathan. So Jonathan mentioned that these exist across the country. So the tuition exchanges, the reciprocity programs that will allow residents to attend a university in another state. And we are regionally serving. So for WICHE, we are located in the West. And if you go to the WICHE website, the same as if you went to the NEVI website or the SREB website or the website for the Midwestern group, if you go to their website, you will find which states, and in our case, we're a little different. We also have US territories included, in addition to some freely associated states in the Pacific. You'll find who is participating in the various programs. Access is critically important in the programs that we're offering, so these tuition discounts, because it means for some folks, if they did not have this program in their particular state, the academic program, they can go to another state and have access to that program. If you happen to be from a place that is a bit smaller, and we do have some small states out here in the West, it means that your particular state may not offer every academic program. So you have the opportunity to go to another state, pay tuition at a rate lower than the out-of-state tuition rate, and have access to that academic program that you were seeking. There's also a workforce development element to this as well. And perhaps we'll come back around to that as we have our short conversation. Jonathan? All right, thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you, Ray. So now we want to talk briefly just about our organizations, about the higher education compacts that exist across the country. Those of us that are members of these organizations, and a bit about what we do, why we do it. And so there are 4 organizations like WICHE and like NEBI that exist. The 2 folks that are, while not represented on the panel, do have very similar resources to us. Those other 2 organizations are the Midwestern Higher Education Compact and Southern Regional Education Board, or MEC and SREB for short. And so these are, we're very similar in that we were all founded at about the same time, about 70 years ago, in the really kind of coinciding with the Eisenhower era rise in public infrastructure development, calls for greater interstate cooperation. And over the span of about 15, 20 years, all 4 of our organizations were created via collaboration between state governors who wanted to answer this call. And the interesting thing about all of our organizations is that we exist in an interesting sort of quasi-public space where we were created by governors. Each of our organizations was given quasi-public status and interstate cooperative abilities by ratification through Congress. And so this is, it's kind of an interesting space that we occupy. And so, we are quasi-public in that we receive partial public funding, but we do operate between and among the states that we serve. And so for that, we have a very sort of interesting and unique mission. But part of the reason I wanted to talk about this is that one of the really common questions I find myself getting from parents is, where does this money come from? How are programs like this possible? Because we between our 2 programs alone, we're responsible for billions of dollars in tuition savings. We serve tens of thousands of students, generate tons of revenue for institutions. And when we say that, parents often ask, why, how does this work? Where does the funding come from? And in reality, because these are discounts and they're not scholarships, these are purely sort of good faith agreements between states, between institutions and the public that say, we're going to lower tuition. We're going to bring the out-of-state number down for students within a particular region, because for those reasons that Ray was just talking about: access, workforce development, interstate cooperation, this idea of trying to serve the public in the best way possible. I know Ray is going to talk a little bit about some of the other things that the compacts do as well.
So over time, all of us have evolved, and our work, if you look at any one of the compacts, they're ever so slightly different. So for example, the Southern Regional Education Board, you'll notice that there are programs related to K-12 programs, as well as an emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion with SREB. With the Midwestern Higher Education Compact, They also have some programs that focus on cost savings for institutions in terms of their campus property insurance, student health insurance, some procurement contracts for technology. In fact, all of us, all of the compacts share in participating in those cost savings initiatives, so that we know that institutions are saving money in other ways as well, where they're coming together as a whole. At WICHE, there is an emphasis on policy. So we have a policy analysis and research unit. And in that unit, they put out a report every 2 years called Knocking on the College Door, that is a forecast of student graduation rates, high school student graduation rates, that are quite informative for colleges and universities across the country. We also have a behavioral health unit, in addition to having a digital learning unit that is currently doing some work focused in on students, no matter where they are, having the ability to access education and also learn. So each one of us is different, even if there are portions of our mission that are exactly the same in terms of bringing colleges and universities together within our region and offering programs like the student access programs or the tuition reciprocity programs.
So now we're going to do a quick dive through each of the 4 compacts and our specific tuition savings programs. I'll kick us off here with Nebi, and then we will move through. And so first things first, our program here in the New England region is called Tuition Break. Now, I will say when we were founded, the program was known as the Regional Student Program. And so you will still certainly see references to that around the region. Folks will say the RSP or the New England Regional Program. And so if you're a counselor within New England, know that while Tuition Break is the formal moniker, and you'll see all of our branding about that, there may also be some colleges that refer to it as the Regional Student Program or the Regional Discount Rate. Now, when we say New England, what I'm talking about are the 6 states that make up our fine region here. Those are Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Vermont. And currently we have over 2,500 associate, bachelor's, graduate degrees, and certificates that are offered at the discount. This number has grown dramatically. And so if you are an experienced counselor here in New England, you'll know that you may know that about 4 years ago, we actually only offered about 800 programs through the discount. However, that number has tripled in the last couple of years as we have expanded our program definitions to be able to more widely offer the discount. Now, currently, all of the public community colleges and universities within New England participate with the program. So that's over 80 institutions, although I will admit, as of July 1, 2023, that number will shrink as there are currently two major mergers that are taking place here in New England. So that number will shrink, but we will still retain total public university engagement within the region. And the way that it works is that we offer 2 kinds of programs: specialized programs, which are only available to students or programs that offer the discount to students who do not have access to that program within their home state. So, for example, if they're in Connecticut and they don't have access to robotics, for example, within Connecticut, but they do in Massachusetts, they would receive the tuition break at an institution in Massachusetts. That is a bad example because robotics is offered in many different places in New England. But I will say the other category we have is flexible, which essentially means that an institution can offer any program that they desire at the discount to any New England resident. This was developed a couple of years ago, and it's really allowed us to expand dramatically the amount of students that we serve and the programs that we offer at the discount. And so from an access point of view, we're really quite proud of how we've been able to expand the program.
And I will talk about the programs that we offer. So we have WUI and WRGP, so the Western Undergraduate Exchange and the Western Regional Graduate Program. Both are set up in a similar fashion, except one is for undergraduate degrees, and then the other is for graduate programs. There are 162 institutions participating in WUI, and there are 66 institutions participating in WRGP. They both cap the tuition that a student would pay at 150% of the in-state rate. Oftentimes, it's less than the 150%. However, that's the cap is at 150. The thing about both WUI and WRGP, and what is critically important to remember, is to have the student check the website. So come to our website, look under tuition savings to look up the savings finder for WUI and then the savings finder for WRGP, because each institution gets to set its rate. Like I said, it's simply capped at the 150%. So you can also see if there are any additional requirements. Some colleges and universities have an application that the student or resident would need to complete as far as participating in WUI or WRGP. So it's important to take a look at each institution and see exactly how they have set up their program and what the requirements are in addition to any application requirements, because there may be GPA requirements coming out of high school as well. So Jonathan, thanks. And here we have the programs for our colleagues at the Midwestern Higher Education Compact and the Southern Regional Education Board. And here you'll see some similarities with the programs that Jonathan and I just talked about, and the places where the programs are active. Something to call out about MSAP is that there are private institutions also participating in their program, and that participating private institutions offer a 10% reduction in their tuition rate. For the academic common market, it is active in 15 SREB states, and it is specifically available for students where the academic program is not available in their home state. And it is also offered at public and private institutions for students pursuing professional health degrees. So here, we wanted to take some time to also share with you some information about other publicly supported financial aid and resources to help with affordability. And one of the ones that sometimes gets not as much press are the state higher education executive offices. So in most states, there is a Department of Higher Education or an Office of Higher Education. They are a great resource for what financial aid may be available across the state that flows through the state. So wanted to call out SHEO.org, where you can learn more about the SHEO offices in different states.
A few other resources, and these I think are particularly useful for those of you who may be in states that are not a part of a compact organization. So as I said, there are a few of those states, for example, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Illinois, a couple of other states in the Midwest that are not a part of a compact, and so therefore don't necessarily have access to the tuition exchange programs we've been discussing. However, this is what we wanted to provide for you folks. So the great thing is that at the state level, almost every state in the union has some kind of what we call an educational finance authority. So if anyone here is from Massachusetts, for us, it's the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority. In Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Higher Ed Assistance Agency. There's, of course, Washington Student Achievement Council in the great state of Washington. And so these are organizations that are similar to the compacts. They're quasi-public. They most often have some kind of affiliation with the state government, although I will not say that's not universal. And they oftentimes they may be involved in the student loan servicing area in that regard. They may also run certain state level grant processes. So for example, the FIA, the Pennsylvania Higher Ed Assistance Agency, they operate what's called the FIA grant, which is a resident grant for students who want to attend higher ed. And so these are excellent resources. I certainly recommend checking to see if you have one available in your state. The National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, that's a mouthful, does have a full repository of all of these organizations on their website. This state financial aid programs webpage actually has a map of the US and will link to every state's authority. And so that's an excellent resource. If you haven't heard of these organizations or you're not sure who is it for Connecticut or Missouri or what have you, that's certainly a great resource for you. And I definitely recommend working with them if you have not already. The other thing I want to say is that in the world of tuition discounting, of course, there are also institution-specific opportunities. Now, these are being institution specific. Ray and I are not the authority necessarily to speak on them, but I want to bring it up because, again, if you're in a state that doesn't necessarily have a compact organization of a program like this is something to be aware of. For example, the state universities of Connecticut, UConn, excluded from this, actually offer reduced tuition to New York and New Jersey residents. So while New York and New Jersey are not a part of NEBI, there are discounted tuition offerings at those institutions. The same goes, or a very similar program is run by the University of Maine in the form of their flagship Promise Scholarship. It is a scholarship program, but it does work in the realm of tuition discounting for out-of-state students. So again, these are just two examples of opportunities that exist like this. So something we wanted to bring up just to say that in the world of publicly supported opportunities, there is a wealth of information out there for sure. Now, I do want to speak as we wind down here. I want to take just about 30 seconds to speak to make just a candid and shameless plug for an opportunity here at NEBI. So if you are a counselor that is in New England, or perhaps if you have students that are interested perhaps in public university opportunities within the region, we are actually utilizing GoToCollegeFairs virtual event platform to create what I've been describing as a buffet style virtual ecosystem where students can engage with us at their leisure. So what we're creating is going to look like a virtual college fair, but it's not going to be a virtual college fair. It's going to be an asynchronous platform that will be open from October, so next week actually, all the way until May 2023. So for this entire admission cycle, this is going to be something that is open and evergreen, and we're going to be filling it with content about financial aid. We're going to be filling it with content about the college search process. We're going to be filling it with information for students, for families, for folks like yourselves. So definitely check us out, follow that QR code, stay tuned for updates. And of course, major thank you to GoToCollegeFairs for being a really great supporter of this and engaging in some experimentation with us here at NEBI for sure. But at this point, we would like to wrap it up and bring it to a point where we will take questions from the audience. We'll leave this slide up for our contact information to be available. So feel free to take a picture or save this. But Holly, where are we at with questions?
There were several questions. I'm going to first of all, thank you so much. I was riveted. I mean, my kids are both already in college, and I still found this really, really useful. I'm so proud to be a part of it. Thank you for doing it. I'm really excited that we did this for the counselors today. I think it was highly useful. What I do notice, both in the questions and in the way that you presented, was because we call this counselor's coffee break, because we said it was 30 minutes long, it really was drinking from a fire hose. So what happened, I think, in the questions is people are like, wait, I need that resource again. So I want to say again, and I give you both an opportunity to also say where you might share these recordings. I will say again, this recording with all those great, there's a list of the states, there's a list of the compacts, there's a list of further resources. Like this slide deck is key. So going back and being able to see that, pause it, especially where the list of all the states are, is going to be really helpful for people who are trying to take it all in. The most popular question is, where can we get a list of all those states? And so I just want to say that in a more global sense, where can you get this information in a slowed down fashion by being able to pause? We will be posting it on the Go to College Fairs website under our resources. It's there's at the top of our nav is resources, and then the drop down, it says on demand webinars. It will appear there. I would expect maybe even as soon as tomorrow. We'll get the recording buttoned up and post it as quickly as we can. We will also send the recording out to anybody who registered for this. We had over 400 registrants and only about 110 at any given time. So we'll make sure that we get it sent out to the registrants as well. Do either of you have plans to post it on your website? And if so, do you want to just mention that really quickly? Because I think that's going to cover a lot of the questions, which are like, where can I get this in a slowed down fashion?
Absolutely. I'll certainly be embedding it on the Tuition Break website for sure. I'll also link it on the College Opportunity and Exploration platform that we're building. Also push it out on LinkedIn and pretty much everywhere else that we can find.
Yeah.
So feel free, reach out. If you don't see it soon, send me an email if you're in New England,
Yeah.
for sure.
And you know what I also can do is just send it into the same channel where people signed up for this. I'll just send it out as an email link. So that'll be helpful also. Ray?
And for us, we'll push it out via social media. So check any of the witchy social media. So LinkedIn, Twitter, like check those and you'll find a link to it.
Thanks, Ray. Okay, so that should answer the question of where can we access a list of those states. Jonathan, if you just really, really quickly want to go back to that slide with the NASFA website, I think that would be really helpful. So I'm going to dismiss the question, will this be this information be sent to our emails? The answer is yes. And then we just have a couple of clarification questions I'm going to lob up. But before I do that, we have reached our 30-minute mark. So on the screen right now is a list of the states, not a list of the states, but a list of the website where you can see all the lists. So I'm going to tick off that as answered. And again, just be looking for the slide deck to appear and the webinar to appear as a recording. And so if you need to drop off, as I see some people are doing, totally respect the 30-minute mark. But I will go ahead and extend, with the panelists' permission, just a few more minutes so that they have a chance to answer a few questions. But if you don't have the opportunity to stay with us any longer, look for the recording and scrub to the end so you can see some of these questions getting answered. So there were some clarification questions I'm going to kind of lump together. One is this, I think this is for you, Ray, regarding WUI. First of all, that some of the schools do refer to their discounts as scholarships. And then some of the schools might ask the students to choose between merit and WUI. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I can speak to both of those. So I imagine that there are some schools, because you have a location on your website under financial aid where you have scholarships, that you would place WUI or WRGP under that scholarship listing. Again, they are discounts. And the other thing about them, schools can come up with their own requirements. So in terms of a school saying a student has to choose between merit or WUI, they get to make those determinations about their financial aid structure. So we simply make sure that all of the schools can come together and provide this type of discounting across state lines. In terms of the structure of the program, schools get to make up their structure. The only hard and fast rule is not, for us anyway in the West, not exceeding the 150% discount on in-state tuition. So not going over that.
That's great. Thank you for that. Okay, the next question I'm going to also kind of clump together. It's really about residency and how is residency determined? I thought those were sharp questions because it wasn't something that we really did cover in depth as you screamed by all the really relevant things. So I wonder if you could just give me a general outline as to how residency is determined. I have a question here that's like, one parent lives in one place, what is, and my spouse lives in a place. So if you could just give like general brushstrokes on residency requirements or the residency rules, so to speak.
I can kick us off here. There are, and this is where things get a little bit weedy with programs like this because there are a fair number of nuances that can actually come down to the institutional level. So here in New England, the residency component is primarily determined by the enrolling institution and the way that they classify residency. So for example, this has come up in fair conversation about what about DACA students, right? And so it comes down to the fact of, there are often, and for public institutions as well, how they determine residency is to an extent also mandated by the state legislator. So there is a component here where it's less about how we as the compacts define residency and more about how does the specific state define what residency means, and then how does the university or community college work within that framework. And so this is where I hate to lean on the traditional admission answer of it depends, but it does quite depend often on sort of state rules around that. Some states have been more flexible with how they define residency, especially around DACA students. I will note on the separated parents or family members piece for just a moment. We see this a fair amount in New England, especially for example, students who may have one parent in Connecticut and one parent in New York, it can be a little bit tricky. So again, that's where, if the student has the runway to determine that their permanent residency is within that New England state, then they would qualify. So it does come down in that case to where's the primary parent live, or I shouldn't say primary parent. Where does that student primarily reside, with whom and in which state is how that's determined. Again, here's where a little bit of institutional nuance comes in, though.
That's fair. I knew that would probably be the case. I just wanted some broad brushstrokes. Do you agree with what Jonathan was just saying, Ray?
Yeah, I agree with what Jonathan was saying. It's going to be institution by institution.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And actually, I was going to single out the next question, but I think you covered it, Jonathan. And I'm maybe making an assumption as to what this person was asking, because the question is, does the parent's legal status or the student's legal status affect tuition discount? And I think that you did cover that. Okay. And then there's just two more questions. What about international students? This isn't available to them, correct? And this is a question I don't know that I really understand, but you might recognize what they're asking. So I'm just going to say is there uniformity in whether a student is automatically considered versus having to apply to, and I'm just going to say any of these programs, because this came in under one of your names, but I think it probably would be good for us to answer that question. It's a good question. Is a student automatically considered for this, or do they have to apply for it?
So in our case for WUI, it is not an automatic consideration. So even in places where there is not an application, the student still needs to indicate that they wish to access the WUI tuition rate for the institution. So and there is not uniformity, except for the fact that they do have to say, I would like the WUI tuition rate.
Is that true for your organization as well, Jonathan?
Essentially, all of our institutions will on there is automatic consideration, so to speak. There are on the applications for all of our public institutions, there is a question that says, do you wish to be considered as a tuition break student? And so it does require students to answer that. But oftentimes, even if they do not answer that, the institutions will, if they qualify, if they're from an eligible state, if there are the requirements for that particular academic program, they will be brought into the program. And I will say as well, as our programs have expanded, institutions have been, they are more actively automatically considering students. But this is, again, one of the things I can't stress enough to you folks, to counselors, to stress to parents and to students is do your due diligence when it comes to reminding them to reach out to their admission counselor and ask them about these programs, because, one of the things that I'm running up against is wanting to ensure that this is as visible as possible, that as many folks know about this opportunity and know how to talk about it with admission folks. And so I strongly recommend, yes, while more often than not, it is automatic, and there is a question that will prompt students to ask. Absolutely have a conversation with the admission person at an institution that they're interested in and say, look, I understand that this program exists. How does it work for this institution? How do I get access to it? Because it is a component where I think we can work harder to make it more visible and more accessible. And while it is a relatively low barrier to entry, I think that due diligence is really a critical factor.
Yeah. I want to say, even though I'm not a pro on this, I think that what I'm hearing you say, and one of the reasons that we wanted to curate this session for counselors is because it is a too well kept secret that and we know that this is a great opportunity and that a lot of people do know about it, but the counselors on this call are watching this as a recording. They're really the ones who can advise their students. Make sure you're asking about this. Make sure you're seeking it out. Make sure you have squeezed everything out of it that you can. And it's just like any other thing. Like when I go to a hospital, I have to advocate for myself or my loved one. You have to advocate for yourself. I heard you, Jonathan, saying, many schools will automatically consider you if you are eligible, but I just know that can't be true everywhere all the time for everyone. And so advocating for yourself is what I'm hearing you say, and advocating for your students. And that was the root of today's presentation. And I think it's a really good way for us to begin to wrap up. There's one more question, but I think what I heard is advocacy is really important. So before we answer that one last question, now is also a good time for us to talk about the next iteration of a webinar like this, which is going to be directed to students and families. And we watch your email for that. We will be pushing out a webinar registration for a similar webinar that is actually directed to students and families. This one was for counselors, and we're speaking to you as the helpers and the advocates for students who need your help to uncover and take advantage of these programs. The next iteration of this webinar series with the same panelists will be directed towards students and families. And so watch your email for that. Or if you're watching this later, watch for that recording as well. Okay, so I'm probably going to wrap up. The questions may continue to come in, but this last one is just about eligibility requirements and GPA requirements. Is there conformity across like how someone is considered to be eligible, or is it variable?
So it is variable. So Jonathan, if you could go to the last slide where the WUI and WRGP savings finder. So here are the links to the tuition savings to WUI. You'll find the savings finder on these pages, and you can see the requirements for each institution when you access the savings finder. So it shows all of the institutions that are participating, the academic programs that they have available, and you can also see the different requirements. So they do vary from institution to institution. So the GPA requirements are different. So again, the advocacy for yourself and really having that information, and so the knowledge that you have around the different institutions is really powerful, and it will allow you to ask some different questions of admissions officers at the different colleges and universities if you know what some of those requirements are before the student starts the application process.
Yeah, would you say a fair question would be to always ask, am I eligible for any tuition savings or reciprocity programs? Like just a flat question to ask of every university. I want to give them sort of a starting point, and that would you say that's a fair starting point for advocacy?
Yes.
Okay, no more questions. Thank you guys so much again. You were fabulous, as I knew that you would be. And we'll just wrap up. Again, a big thank you to the panelists who were amazing. So much information in their noggins. So I appreciate them dumping a little bit of that out today. And also being willing, as you can see on the slide, to continue that download to you as you may have follow-up questions. They've been generous enough to share ways that you can reach them, which is really, really kind. And I know that they both really believe in the programs that they are representing today, and they really advocate for counselor, student, and family use of these programs. So I'm sure that they would love some follow-up questions if you have them. And we will send out registration for the webinar that's directed more towards students and families. That's going to be coming pretty quickly on the heels of this. I may even include it in the recording that I send out. So we might kill two birds with one stone. And so just keep a sharp eye out for all of these webinars. We're really excited to be able to offer this content. Any parting thoughts from my panelists?
I'll just say another thank you, and also to those counselors that remain. Really appreciate your time, especially we know you're staring down the barrel of some October 15 deadlines. So, really thanks to you for being here. Thanks for all you do for your students, and let us know what we can do to help.
And I'll just say ditto.
I love your brevity. Thanks, Ray. Okay, guys, thanks for being here. We'll talk to you all soon.